If you've been waking up and jumping straight out of bed every single morning, I need you to stop and listen to what I'm about to tell you because this one habit, something you do within the first 60 seconds of opening your eyes, could be silently putting your heart under enormous stress. And for millions of Americans over the age of 60, this is not a distant risk. This is happening every single day without any warning signs at all. And the terrifying part is that most people never connect the dots until it's too late because nobody ever told them that the way you wake up in the morning matters just as much as what you eat or how much you exercise. And today that changes because I'm going to show you exactly what's going wrong, why it's so dangerous, and how you can fix it in just 30 seconds starting tomorrow morning. I am Dr. Sarah Brooks. I've been practicing medicine for over 20 years, and today I dedicate my work entirely to helping seniors live healthier, longer lives. And one of the most common things I see in my practice, and one of the most preventable, is cardiovascular stress, triggered not by diet, not by genetics, not by a sedentary lifestyle, but by a simple morning mistake that almost every single one of my patients was making before I taught them how to stop. You are not alone in this. In fact, according to cardiovascular research published in the United States, the early morning hours, specifically between 6 and 10 in the morning, are when the risk of heart attack is significantly higher than at any other time of day. And most people assume that's just a coincidence or that it has to do with stress or coffee. But the real reason goes much deeper than that. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your body during those first moments after you wake up, you will never look at your morning routine the same way again. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will have a simple, practical 30-second fix that could genuinely save your life. So let me ask you something before we go any further. Do you wake up and immediately sit up or stand up? Do you grab your phone the second your eyes open? Do you rush to the bathroom or head straight to the kitchen without giving your body even a moment to adjust? If you answered yes to any of those, then what I'm about to share is especially important for you. And I want you to hit that thumbs up button right now if any of this sounds familiar, because it helps other seniors find this content, and it truly means a lot to me and to this community we're building together. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening inside your body while you sleep, because this is where the whole story begins. And once you understand the science, everything else is going to make perfect sense. While you're sleeping, your body shifts into what we call a parasympathetic state. That's the rest and repair mode. And during those hours, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate slows down, your blood becomes slightly more viscous, meaning slightly thicker, and your entire cardiovascular system is operating at a lower gear because it doesn't need to work as hard while you're lying still, and your muscles are relaxed and your brain is in a deep restorative cycle. Now, here is where the problem begins. The moment your alarm goes off and you jolt yourself awake and immediately start moving, sitting up fast, standing up quickly, rushing around, your body has to make an incredibly rapid shift from that low gear parasympathetic state all the way to a high gear sympathetic state, which is your fight or flight response. And that transition triggers a sudden surge of cortisol and adrenaline that causes your blood pressure to spike, your heart rate to jump, and your blood vessels to constrict all at the same time. And for a young, healthy 25-year-old with flexible arteries and a strong heart, the body handles that transition without much trouble. But for someone over 60, especially someone with even mild arterial stiffness or slightly elevated blood pressure, and that describes the majority of American seniors, that sudden cardiovascular surge can be genuinely dangerous, and in some cases, it can be the trigger that pushes a vulnerable plaque in one of your arteries to rupture, which is exactly how most heart attacks begin. According to research from the American Heart Association, the incidence of heart attack is 24% higher in the morning hours compared to other times of the day, and studies have shown that this elevated risk is directly connected to the physiological changes that happen during the transition from sleep to wakefulness. And what makes this even more alarming is that many of these morning heart attacks happen to people who had no major symptoms beforehand. People who thought they were relatively healthy, people who had no idea that their morning routine was working against their heart every single day. I remember a patient of mine, a 72-year-old man named Gerald from Tennessee, a retired school principal who walked every day, ate reasonably well, took his blood pressure medication faithfully, and had annual checkups with his doctor. And he came to see me not because of chest pain or shortness of breath, but because his wife had noticed that he looked pale and slightly disoriented every single morning for about 15 minutes after getting up. And when I asked him to describe his morning routine, he told me the exact same thing I hear from so many of my patients. Alarm goes off. He sits straight up, grabs his phone immediately to check the news and his messages, stands up quickly to go to the bathroom, then heads to the kitchen to make coffee, all within about 3 minutes of opening his eyes. And when I explained to him what was happening to his cardiovascular system during those 3 minutes, his eyes went wide because he had never once in his life connected those morning habits to his heart health. And after we made one simple change to his morning routine, just one, that morning, pallor and disorientation disappeared completely within a week. And that's exactly what I want to do for you today, because the longer you continue this pattern without understanding it, the more stress you're accumulating on your cardiovascular system every single morning. And over months and years, that adds up to significant wear on your arteries, your heart muscle, and your blood pressure regulation system, which means the longer you wait, the harder it gets to reverse. And every single day that you wake up the wrong way is a day that puts unnecessary strain on the most important muscle in your body. So let's talk about the fix, the 30-second solution that can transform your morning from a cardiovascular risk into a heart protective ritual. And the beautiful thing about this is that it costs nothing, requires no special equipment, no supplements, no gym membership, and you can start doing it tomorrow morning the moment your eyes open. The first solution I want to share with you is what I call the Gentle Wake Protocol, and it's the foundation of everything. And here is exactly how it works. When your alarm goes off, or whenever you naturally wake up, instead of immediately sitting up or reaching for your phone, I want you to simply lie still for 30 seconds and take 3 slow, deep breaths. And I know that sounds almost too simple, but bear with me because what those 30 seconds accomplish inside your body is genuinely remarkable. Those 3 deep breaths activate your vagus nerve, which is the main cable of your parasympathetic nervous system. And when the vagus nerve is stimulated, it sends a direct signal to your heart to slow down and regulate its rhythm before the sympathetic surge kicks in. And it also triggers a gentle release of nitric oxide in your blood vessels, which causes them to dilate rather than constrict, which means that when your blood pressure does begin to rise as you wake up, it does so gradually and smoothly rather than in a sudden spike. And for anyone with arterial stiffness, slightly elevated blood pressure, or a history of any cardiovascular issues, that difference between a gradual rise and a sudden spike is the difference between a safe morning and a dangerous one. And it gets even better because those 30 seconds also give your baroreceptors, the pressure sensors in your major arteries, time to recalibrate and prepare for the shift from horizontal to vertical, which means when you do stand up, your blood pressure adjusts properly instead of dropping suddenly, which is what causes that dizziness and lightheadedness that so many seniors experience when they get up too quickly. And that dizziness, by the way, is called orthostatic hypotension. And it's a significant fall risk for people over 65. And this same 30-second breathing practice can dramatically reduce how often it happens. Now, let me give you Dr. Brooks's morning heart protocol because I want you to have something concrete and practical that you can write down or memorize and start using immediately. Here is exactly what I recommend to all of my senior patients. When you first wake up, before you move a single muscle, take 1 slow breath in through your nose for a count of 4, hold it gently for a count of 2, and breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. And then repeat that 2 more times for a total of 3 breath cycles. And while you're doing that, I want you to gently wiggle your fingers and your toes, not dramatically, just lightly. And this starts waking up circulation in your extremities in a gentle way that primes your cardiovascular system for movement without shocking it. And then after those 3 breaths, slowly roll onto your side rather than sitting straight up from flat on your back, because sitting straight up from a flat position engages your abdominal muscles and your core in a way that creates a brief but significant spike in intra-abdominal pressure, which pushes blood rapidly upward toward your heart. And if your arteries are not ready for that, it's like suddenly squeezing a garden hose that's been lying still all night. And then once you're on your side, pause for another 10 seconds, take 1 more slow breath, and then gently push yourself up to seated using your arms. And once you're seated, stay at the edge of the bed for another 15 to 20 seconds before you stand. And during that time, you can begin to look around, stretch your neck gently side to side, feel your feet on the floor and give your blood pressure regulation system those extra seconds it needs to prepare for the shift to standing. And that's it. That's the whole protocol. And it takes less than 90 seconds total. And it could be one of the most important things you do for your heart health every single morning. You can find everything you need to do this at home. No special equipment, nothing to buy at Walmart or CVS, nothing to order online. Just your own breath and 30 extra seconds of patience and presence in the morning. And I want you to think about that for a moment because we live in a culture that glorifies rushing, that celebrates being busy and productive from the second we open our eyes. And I understand that. I really do. But your heart doesn't care about productivity and it doesn't reward urgency. And what it needs, what it has always needed, is a gentle, respectful transition from rest to activity. And when you give it that, you are investing in decades more of strength and independence and quality of life. Now, let's deepen this conversation because there's more happening in the morning hours that you need to know about. And this brings us to the second major factor that turns your morning routine into a cardiovascular risk. And that is what you reach for first thing in the morning before you've had a single sip of water. And I'm talking about your phone. I know. I hear the resistance already. But let me explain the physiology, and then you can decide for yourself. When you pick up your phone within the first few minutes of waking up and you start scrolling through news headlines or checking messages or reading emails, your brain immediately begins processing information that is emotionally loaded. News is almost always stressful. Messages often carry expectations or concerns, and social media is designed by engineers in Silicon Valley to trigger emotional reactions. And that emotional processing triggers a second wave of cortisol on top of the cortisol surge that's already happening from the transition out of sleep. And now your body is dealing with two overlapping stress hormone spikes within the first 5 minutes of the day, and your heart is having to respond to both of them simultaneously. And for a cardiovascular system that is already navigating the most vulnerable transition of the 24-hour cycle, that double cortisol hit is genuinely dangerous. And it's something that simply did not exist for previous generations because they didn't have smartphones waiting on their nightstand when they woke up. According to research from Harvard Medical School, morning cortisol levels peak naturally within the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking up. This is called the cortisol awakening response. And it's a normal and necessary process that helps you become alert and functional. But when you add additional emotional stressors on top of that natural peak, you can push cortisol to levels that are inflammatory, that elevate blood pressure, that increase blood clotting factors, and that narrow your coronary arteries. And again, for a young person with healthy arteries, this is uncomfortable but manageable. But for a senior with any degree of cardiovascular vulnerability, it is a genuine risk factor every single morning. So here's the second piece of Dr. Brooks's morning heart protocol. And this one is going to require a little bit of discipline, but I promise you, it's worth it. For the first 30 minutes after you wake up, keep your phone face down or in another room, and instead of reaching for it, I want you to do something that seems almost old-fashioned, but is one of the most heart protective things you can do, and that is to drink a full glass of water before you do anything else. During the 7 to 9 hours you've been sleeping, your body has been losing moisture through breathing and perspiration, and by the time you wake up, you are in a mild state of dehydration. And here's why that matters for your heart. When you are dehydrated, your blood becomes more concentrated and more viscous, meaning thicker, and your heart has to work harder to pump thicker blood through your circulatory system. And your risk of blood clot formation increases. And for someone whose arteries already have some degree of plaque buildup, which describes the majority of Americans over the age of 65, a thicker, more concentrated blood moving through narrowed spaces is exactly the kind of condition that can trigger a cardiovascular event. Drinking 16 ounces of room temperature water first thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else, immediately begins to thin and hydrate your blood, reduces the workload on your heart, helps your kidneys flush overnight metabolic waste, and triggers what scientists call the gastrocolic reflex, which gently activates your digestive system in a way that is healthy and natural and not stressful to your cardiovascular system and room temperature. Water is better than ice. Cold water first thing in the morning because cold water can trigger a mild vasoconstrictive response in sensitive individuals, meaning it can cause blood vessels to briefly narrow, which is the opposite of what we want in those vulnerable morning minutes. So, Always go for room temperature or slightly warm water, first thing. And I actually recommend that many of my patients add a small squeeze of fresh lemon juice to that morning glass of water because lemon contains vitamin C and flavonoids that support endothelial health. That's the health of the inner lining of your blood vessels. And it also has a gentle alkalizing effect on your body chemistry, which supports overall cardiovascular function throughout the day. If you want access to exclusive content, deeper health advice, and personalized home remedy guides tailored specifically for seniors, become a member of our channel. I share even more detailed information there just for our members. And it's a wonderful community of people who are all working together towards stronger, healthier lives. Now, let me tell you about a patient who really brought this water lesson home for me. Her name was Dorothy, a 78-year-old retired nurse from Minnesota. And yes, a nurse who needed a doctor's advice, which she was the first to laugh about. And Dorothy had been having episodes of what her cardiologist called morning palpitations, where her heart would flutter or race for a few minutes after she woke up, and her EKG was essentially normal, and her cardiologist was puzzled, and Dorothy herself was frightened because she knew enough as a nurse to know that morning palpitations in someone her age were not something to ignore. And when she came to see me and I asked her about her morning routine, she told me that she woke up, went straight to the kitchen, made a strong cup of coffee, and sat down at the table with her phone to read the morning news before she had consumed a single drop of water. And she had been doing this every single morning for years. And I asked her to try something for 2 weeks. Drink 16 ounces of room temperature water with lemon before her coffee, keep her phone away for the first 30 minutes, and do the gentle wake protocol before getting out of bed. And she came back 2 weeks later and told me that the palpitations had not happened once in those 2 weeks. And she was almost angry at how simple the solution had been after months of worry and cardiac testing. And I'm sharing Dorothy's story because I know so many of you have had similar experiences where your body is sending you signals and the medical system runs tests and doesn't find anything dramatic and sends you home without a clear answer. And sometimes the answer is not in a lab result. Sometimes it's in the first 30 minutes of your morning. Now, let me share with you the third and most powerful component of what I call the complete morning heart shield. And this goes beyond the immediate physical mechanics of waking up and into the deeper daily habits that either protect your heart every morning or put it at risk. And this one involves what you consume in the first hour after waking up. And I'm going to give you a specific recipe that you can make at home with ingredients you can find at any Walmart, Kroger, or local grocery store across America. And that takes about 4 minutes to prepare. And that research has shown can measurably support cardiovascular health when consumed consistently. I call it the Morning Heart Shield drink. And here is exactly what goes into it. You'll need 1 cup of warm water, not boiling, just warm enough to be comfortable to drink, half a teaspoon of ground turmeric, which you can find in the spice aisle of any American grocery store and which contains curcumin, one of the most well studied natural anti inflammatory compounds in existence. And inflammation is one of the primary drivers of arterial plaque buildup and morning cardiovascular stress. So, this is a direct hit on one of the root causes of heart disease, a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger, which supports circulation and has been shown in research to reduce morning blood pressure variability, a small pinch of black pepper, and this is important, don't skip it. Because black pepper contains piperine, which increases the bioavailability of curcumin from the turmeric by up to 2,000%, meaning your body can actually absorb and use the turmeric if black pepper is present, and without it, much of the benefit is lost in digestion. 1 teaspoon of raw honey, which provides gentle, natural sugars that your brain needs in the morning without causing the insulin spike that processed sugar would trigger. And finally, a small squeeze of fresh lemon juice, as I mentioned earlier, for its vitamin C and endothelial support properties. You stir everything together in a mug until the honey dissolves, and you drink it slowly over about 5 minutes, ideally, before or alongside your breakfast. And if you don't love the taste immediately, give it a week because your palate adjusts, and many of my patients end up craving it every morning after just a few days. And more importantly, the way they feel. The reduction in morning stiffness, the clearer thinking, the more stable energy becomes its own motivation to keep going. And this drink is especially powerful when combined with the breathing protocol and the water hydration. I described earlier because together they work on three different mechanisms simultaneously. The breathing addresses the nervous system transition, the water addresses blood viscosity and hydration, and this drink addresses systemic inflammation and circulation support. And when all three work together, they create a comprehensive morning shield for your cardiovascular system that is simple, inexpensive, and backed by real science. Write in the comments right now. Which of these three solutions are you already doing, or which one are you going to try first? Your experience could genuinely help someone else watching this video who is on the fence about making a change, and your story matters more than you know. Now, I want to address something that I hear from patients regularly when I talk about morning routines and heart health, and that is the question of medication timing, because many seniors over 65 are taking blood pressure medication or heart medication of some kind, and the time at which you take those medications in relation to your morning routine matters more than most people realize. If you are taking a beta blocker, an ACE inhibitor, or a calcium channel blocker in the morning, taking it after your water and your morning heart shield drink rather than on a completely empty stomach can improve absorption and reduce the likelihood of morning nausea that some people experience with cardiac medications. And more importantly, staying well hydrated when you take blood pressure medication helps ensure that it's being properly absorbed and distributed through your system. And I want to be very clear. I never change the timing of your medications without talking to your primary care doctor first. What I'm suggesting here is simply that hydrating before you take your morning medications is generally beneficial, and your doctor can advise you on the specifics for your particular medication regimen. And this brings me to something I want to say very directly to anyone watching this who has been putting off a conversation with their doctor about morning symptoms. Dizziness when you stand up, racing heart in the first minutes after waking, shortness of breath in the morning, unusual fatigue right after getting out of bed, or any chest discomfort, no matter how mild. Please do not ignore those signals, and please do not assume they're just a normal part of aging, because they are not always normal and they deserve to be evaluated. And the changes I'm sharing with you today are supportive lifestyle practices that work alongside medical care, not instead of it. And you deserve to have a doctor who takes your morning symptoms seriously and helps you understand what your body's telling you. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, heart disease remains the leading cause of death for Americans over the age of 65. And yet, the majority of the daily habits that either protect or damage the cardiovascular system are well within our control, and that includes the morning habits we've been discussing today. And what I find both heartbreaking and hopeful about that statistic is that heartbreaking because so many people are losing years of their lives to a condition that has modifiable risk factors, and hopeful because it means that the choices you make every single morning, how you wake up, what you drink, how you manage the transition from sleep to activity, are genuine opportunities to protect yourself and extend your healthy years. And nobody should ever feel like their heart health is completely out of their hands, because it is not, and the science is very clear on that. Let me also talk about one more morning factor that most people never consider, and that is room temperature when you wake up, specifically during the winter months across the Midwest, the Northeast, New England, and the Northern Plains, states where temperatures drop dramatically overnight. And many Americans wake up to cold bedrooms either because their heating system cycles down at night or because they prefer sleeping in a cooler room. And research has shown that sudden exposure to cold air first thing in the morning causes immediate vasoconstriction, meaning your blood vessels tighten and narrow. And this raises blood pressure and reduces blood flow to the heart muscle itself. And when you combine that cold air vasoconstriction with the natural morning cortisol surge and the physiological transition from sleep to wakefulness, you have a perfect storm of cardiovascular stress happening simultaneously. And this is a significant reason why cardiac events are statistically more common during winter mornings in colder climates. The simple solution is to keep a lightweight robe or warm top right next to your bed so that the first thing you reach for when you sit up is warmth. And if you have a programmable thermostat, set it to begin warming the house about 15 to 20 minutes before your alarm goes off so that the room is already at a comfortable temperature when you wake up. And this is not about luxury or comfort. This is about giving your arteries a gentler environment to operate in during the most vulnerable cardiovascular transition of your day. And even in warmer climates like the South and Southwest, air conditioning often makes bedrooms quite cold overnight. And the same principle applies, so this is relevant regardless of where you live across America.